You've been lied to. Your entire life, you've been sold the hustle culture myth that if you just work hard enough, manifest harder, or optimize your morning routine, you can bend the universe to your will. You are exhausted, anxious, and deeply frustrated because you think you are failing. But here is the brutal truth. You aren't failing. The game is rigged, not against you, but against your ego. Life doesn't care about your goals, your deadlines, or your desperate need for validation. And until you accept that, you will continue to be a slave to a script you didn't write. We live in an era of the cult of productivity. We are conditioned to believe that life is a project to be managed, a problem to be solved, and a climb to be conquered. We treat existence like a spreadsheet if we input the right variables. We expect a specific output. When that output fails to materialize, we don't blame the system, we blame ourselves. We double down, we hustle harder, and we fall into the trap of neurotic striving. Jiddu Krishnamurti once famously cut through this noise with a chillingly simple realization. Life doesn't care. This isn't a nihilistic manifesto, it is a psychological liberation. In American psychology, this mirrors the concept of radical acceptance, the practice of accepting reality as it is, without judgment or attempt to control the uncontrollable. When you stop trying to force life into your preferred narrative, you stop resisting the flow of reality. This isn't about giving up, it's about giving in to the truth of the present moment. Most of your suffering doesn't come from the challenges themselves, it comes from the friction generated by your resistance to them. In this video, we are going to deconstruct the psychology of the striver, why your brain is addicted to control, and how to reach the state of effortless action that the masters of old and the high performers of today actually live by. It's time to stop fighting the current and learn how to navigate the river. Let's dissect the anatomy of surrender. The architecture of the human mind is built upon a fundamental, desperate craving for certainty. From the moment you wake up, your brain is engaged in a continuous, high-speed calculation to predict what will happen next. It is scanning the environment for threats, opportunities, and patterns, trying to ensure that you remain safe, significant, and in charge. This is not just a personality quirk. It is the biological baseline of our species. We have evolved to be master controllers, constantly attempting to shape our external environment to align with our internal desires. We call this the quest for success, but in reality, it is the birth of the striver archetype. To understand why life feels like a constant, uphill battle, we must first look at the neurobiology of control. Your brain possesses a structure called the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive function, planning, and goal setting. It is the part of you that keeps a calendar, sets alarms, and dreams of the future. The prefrontal cortex hates ambiguity. When it perceives a gap between where you are and where you want to be, it signals a state of alarm. This alarm manifests as anxiety, restlessness, and that nagging voice in your head telling you that you are not doing enough. Your brain essentially tricks you into believing that if you can just exert enough mental energy, you can mandate reality to bend to your preferences. It convinces you that if you worry enough, plan hard enough, and push enough, the universe will have no choice but to grant you the outcome you crave. However, this is a profound biological misunderstanding. The universe operates on laws of entropy, timing, and interconnected variables that are far beyond the reach of your personal intent. When you attempt to control the uncontrollable, you are not exercising power, you are engaging in a futile struggle against the nature of reality itself. This is the core of the striver archetype. The striver is the person who believes that their worth is tied to their ability to manipulate the world. They view life as a series of problems to be solved, and people to be managed. They treat every day as a campaign, and they view every moment of rest as a tactical error. The tragedy of the striver is that they are perpetually addicted to the cycle of anticipation. This is where the chemistry of the brain plays a cruel trick on us. When you set a goal, your brain releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation. But here is the critical detail. Dopamine is not about pleasure. It is about the pursuit of pleasure. It is a chemical of more. It motivates you to climb the mountain, but it does not allow you to enjoy the view once you reach the summit. As soon as you hit your goal, the dopamine spike drops, and your brain immediately begins scanning for the next target. This is why you can achieve everything you ever wanted, the job, the money, the status, and still feel empty. You aren't actually pursuing a destination. You are addicted to the act of chasing. You have equated the feeling of strain with the feeling of purpose. This addiction to the chase is reinforced by the modern narrative of success. We are bombarded with messages that imply our lives are unfinished projects. We are told to optimize our bodies, hacks our focus, and crush our goals. This cultural conditioning turns your ego into a fortress. The ego is the part of your psyche that demands validation. It is the part of you that needs life to care. It needs to know that your efforts are recognized, that your suffering is meaningful, and that your path is special. When life inevitably fails to provide this validation, when you lose a job, when a relationship ends, or when plans simply fall apart, the ego experiences this as an existential threat. It screams that something is wrong, and it demands that you fight harder. This is the point where the striver becomes disconnected from reality. You begin to experience life through a filter of judgment. You stop seeing things as they are and start seeing them as what they should be. If it is raining, you are annoyed because you wanted sun. If a colleague disagrees with you, you are offended because you wanted agreement. You are effectively living in a mental simulation of your own making, rather than inhabiting the actual world. This creates a state of perpetual friction. Imagine trying to drive a car while constantly keeping one foot on the brake. You are burning massive amounts of energy, emotional, mental, and physical, yet you are barely moving forward because you are resisting the very path you are driving on. The irony of the striver is that the more they try to secure their future, the more they destroy their present. By focusing exclusively on the next milestone, they miss the reality of the moment they are currently standing in. They become ghosts in their own lives, haunting the future while neglecting the only time that actually exists. The illusion of control is a psychological defense mechanism against the fear of death, insignificance, and the unknown. We hold on tightly because we are terrified of what might happen if we let go. We believe that if we stop trying, we will drift into failure. But what if the opposite is true? What if the struggle itself is what prevents you from seeing the path clearly? When you operate from a place of chronic striving, your nervous system is trapped in a state of fight or flight. Your cortisol levels stay elevated, which inhibits your ability to think creatively, connect with others, and find genuine peace. You become rigid. In nature, rigidity is the first thing to break in a storm. The trees that survive are the ones that can bend, the ones that flow with the wind rather than trying to stop it. By being a constant striver, you have made yourself brittle. You are waiting for the world to confirm your value, but the world is busy existing. It is not malicious. It is simply indifferent to your personal narrative. Recognizing the striver within you is the first step toward reclaiming your sanity. It requires you to observe your own behavior with cold, clinical honesty. Notice when you are trying to force an outcome. Notice when you feel anxious because you aren't in control. Notice the specific feeling of the ego needing to be right or needing to be recognized. Most people spend their entire lives running away from these feelings, distracting themselves with more busyness, more noise, and more striving. They are terrified that if they stop, they will be left with nothing. But if you are brave enough to pause, you will find that beneath the layer of constant striving, there is a different way of being. It is a way of being that does not require you to manipulate the environment to justify your existence. It is a state of radical honesty, where you accept that you are a small part of a vast, complex system that you can influence but never fully command. The striver thinks, if I don't control this, it will be a disaster. The awakened mind thinks, this is what is happening, and I will navigate it as it unfolds. This shift in perspective is the foundation of true power. When you stop trying to wrestle the world into the shape you want, you stop wasting your energy on resistance. You suddenly have access to your full capacity. You are no longer exhausted by the internal war against reality. You become an observer of your own life, moving through challenges with a clarity that the striver can never achieve. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is the truth of this situation? This is the end of the illusion. You are not the conductor of the universe. You are a participant in a grand, unfolding process. The sooner you drop the heavy, exhausting armor of the striver, the sooner you can actually begin to experience the depth and richness of your own life. You do not need to be a force of control to be effective. In fact, when you let go of the need for control, you become more effective than ever, because you are finally working with the reality of life instead of against it. The path forward is not found by striving harder. It is found by ceasing the struggle and stepping fully into the present moment, exactly as it is, without the demand that it be any different. Jiddu Krishnamurti, famously argued that the human mind is a prisoner of its own past. To understand what he meant by freedom from the known, we have to recognize that almost everything you think, feel, and do is a product of your conditioning. You are not a blank slate. You are a collection of memories, traumas, societal expectations, religious dogmas, and educational systems. You are the known. When you look at the world, you are not seeing the world as it actually is. You are seeing a projection of your past. If you look at a stranger, you don't see them. You see a projection based on the millions of faces you have seen before, your biases, your past experiences with people who look like them, and your internal judgments. You are constantly filtering reality through the lens of what you have already learned. Krishnamurti calls this the trap of the known. The tragedy of human existence, as Krishnamurti saw it, is that we try to solve the problems of the present with the tools of the past. We encounter a new situation, a conflict in a relationship, a crisis at work, a moment of deep sadness, and our immediate reaction is to reach into our memory bank to see how we solved this problem before or how we were taught to solve it. We rely on knowledge, which is always, by definition, the past. But the moment is always new. Because life is fluid and constantly moving, the stale, dead memory of the past can never truly meet the living, breathing reality of the present. This creates a friction. We feel anxious and frustrated because our rigid, past-based responses are not working in the fluid, present-day environment. We are trying to pour new wine into old bottles, and the bottles are cracking. Freedom from the known, therefore, is not about acquiring more knowledge or learning new techniques for self-improvement. Most of us believe that if we just read enough books, attend enough seminars, or listen to enough experts, we will eventually fix ourselves. We think we can become better by adding more information to our psyche. Krishnamurti flips this upside down. He suggests that we don't need more knowledge. We need the complete clearing away of the knowledge we already have. Freedom is not an accumulation, it is a subtraction. It is the act of unlearning. To be free is to be in a state of mind where you are not constantly translating the present into the language of the past. It is the ability to look at a situation without the interference of your own history. Consider the concept of fear. Where does fear come from? It does not come from the present moment. If a tiger is chasing you, you have a physical reaction, which is survival. But the fear we carry in our daily lives, the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of losing someone, is entirely psychological. It is based on thought. Thought says, I was hurt by this person before, therefore I will be hurt again. Thought says, I failed in the past, therefore I will fail in the future. Thought is effectively a machine that runs on memory. It projects past patterns onto future possibilities. Fear is the mental projection of a past experience into a future that has not yet happened. If you were truly living in the present, fear would not exist, because the present is always manageable. It is only when we move into the future via our thoughts that we become terrified. Krishnamurti forces us to confront the idea that the thinker and the thought are one. We have this illusion that there is an I inside of us who is the master of our thoughts, the one who can control our thinking. We think we can choose to be positive, choose to be happy, or choose to let go. But if you watch your mind closely, you will see that thoughts are not coming from you. They are arising spontaneously based on your conditioning. You are not the master of your thoughts. You are the field upon which thoughts occur. When you realize that the I is just another thought, the whole structure of the self begins to dissolve. Most people spend their lives trying to protect this I. We defend our opinions, our identities, and our pasts because we think this is who we are. But this I is just a construct of memories. When you stop protecting the I, you lose the sense of being an isolated, separate entity in conflict with the rest of the world. This brings us to the core of the Krishnamurti perspective. The observer is the observed. We usually think there is an observer, the subject, and an observed, the object. I am looking at a tree. I am looking at a problem. I am looking at my anger. We think we can analyze our anger like a scientist looking at a specimen. But you cannot be separate from your anger. You are the anger. The moment you try to change your anger, or suppress it, or understand it from a distance, you are creating a duality. You are creating a conflict between the good me who wants to be calm and the bad anger that needs to be fixed. This internal civil war is the source of all psychological suffering. When you realize that you are not separate from your reaction, that the observer is the observed the internal conflict ends. You don't try to change the anger, you simply look at it. You observe it with total attention, without judging it, without naming it, and without trying to push it away. In that state of choiceless awareness, the anger evaporates because it no longer has the energy of your resistance feeding it. Many people find this incredibly difficult because we are addicted to the idea of becoming. We want to become better, become enlightened, become successful, become peaceful. This process of becoming implies time. It implies that I am not there yet, but I will be there in the future. This puts our salvation into the hands of time. But psychological time is an illusion. You cannot become peaceful by working toward it. If you are not peaceful now, you will never be peaceful, because the now is all you ever have. If you are not patient now, you cannot become patient by practicing it. The practice is just another form of conditioning. Either you are patient or you are not. When you see this, you drop the pursuit of becoming. You drop the pursuit of the future. You accept that you are exactly what you are at this very moment, with all your flaws, fears, and conditioning. And in that total, radical acceptance of what is, the transformation happens naturally. This is the freedom from the known. It is the end of psychological time. It is the state where the mind is silent. Most of our minds are like a radio that cannot be turned off. We are constantly chattering, analyzing, judging, comparing, and remembering. We are never silent. Silence is not just the absence of noise. It is the absence of the me that is constantly evaluating the world. When the mind is silent, it is capable of perceiving reality with a clarity that is impossible for a busy, conditioned mind. In that silence, you don't need to solve your life. You act with intelligence, not with reaction. You respond to situations as they are, rather than as your past demands they be. The difficulty for most of us is that we are afraid of this silence. We are afraid of what we will find if we stop our mental chatter. We are terrified that if we stop the striving, if we stop the constant internal narrative, we will disappear. And in a sense, we do. The ego disappears. The rigid, defensive, insecure identity we have spent a lifetime building dissolves. This is what Krishnamurti meant when he said that death is not something that happens at the end of life. Death is the ending of the self, moment by moment. To live is to die to the past every second. It is to approach every moment as if it were the first and the last. Think about how much energy you spend trying to be somebody. You are trying to be someone respected, someone successful, someone loved. You are trying to live up to the image you have of yourself, or the image others have of you. This requires an enormous amount of energy. It requires constant maintenance. You have to constantly justify your actions, defend your image, and seek approval. This is the weight of the known. You are carrying the weight of your entire history with you everywhere you go. Imagine putting down that bag. Imagine walking into a room without any agenda, without any need to impress, without any fear of rejection. Imagine being totally open, totally vulnerable, and totally present. That is freedom. People often ask, if I stop using my memory, if I stop using my past to guide me, won't I be incapable of functioning in the world? This is a misunderstanding. You still need technical knowledge. You need to know how to drive a car, how to do your job, how to speak language. That is functional knowledge. The problem is not functional knowledge. The problem is psychological knowledge. The problem is the internal image you have of yourself. You can function in the world perfectly well without the burden of an ego that needs to be gratified, defended, or elevated. You can be highly effective precisely because you are not distracted by your own internal drama. Freedom from the known is not a concept to be understood. It is a reality to be lived. You cannot think your way into it. Reading about it is not it. Listening to a lecture is not it. It is an act of observation. You must observe your own mind in operation. When you are angry, catch the anger in the act. Don't analyze it. Don't judge it. Don't look for the root cause in your childhood. Just watch the sensation. Watch the way the mind tries to justify the anger. Watch the way the I tries to claim the anger. When you watch it with total intensity, the distance between you and the anger vanishes. You stop being the victim of your own emotions. You become the space in which they appear and disappear. This is the only way to break the cycle of the striver. You stop striving because you realize there is nowhere to go. You stop trying to change the world or change yourself because you realize that the world and the self are the same process, and this process is inherently intelligent when it is not blocked by the interference of the me. You stop living in the future, and you stop living in the past. You inhabit the present with a sharpness that borders on ferocity. You are no longer living life according to a script. You are living life as it is. The challenge is that this requires total honesty. It requires the willingness to admit that your life, as you have constructed it, is a lie. It is a lie because it is based on the idea that you are separate from life and that you must control it to be safe. Freedom from the known requires the courage to walk into the unknown. The unknown is not a place, it is a state of mind. It is a state where you don't know what will happen next, and you are perfectly fine with that. It is a state where you don't know who you are, because you are constantly being recreated by the moment. We are so used to the comfort of the known. Even when the known is painful, we prefer it because it is familiar. We prefer the misery we know over the peace we don't know. To break free, you have to be willing to leave behind the familiar shores of your own identity. You have to be willing to stand in the middle of the river, without a boat, without a paddle, trusting that the current of life will take you where you need to go. This is not passive. This is the most active, alert state of being possible. It is the state of the living, not the state of the record player that only plays the same songs over and over again. In this space of freedom, intelligence awakens. When the brain is not caught up in the mechanical repetition of the past, it functions with incredible speed and clarity. It sees the truth of situations immediately. It doesn't need to deliberate, because it is not analyzing everything through the filter of what does this mean for me. It sees what is, and it acts accordingly. This is the intelligence of the universe, and it is available to you, but only when you are willing to step out of the way. You are the only obstacle to your own liberation. You are the only thing standing between you and the truth. So, how do we begin? We begin by realizing that there is no how. The moment you ask for a method, you are back in the realm of the known. You are looking for a system to control your mind. And systems are the enemy of freedom. There is no path, no teacher, no technique that can give you this. It is a work that you must do yourself, by simply paying attention. You must pay attention to your thoughts, your feelings, and your reactions, as if you were looking at them for the first time. You must watch the way you defend yourself, the way you seek approval, the way you cling to your opinions. You must watch all of this without judging it. Just watch. And in the watching, the transformation occurs. It is not something you do. It is something that happens to you when you stop getting in the way. It is the ending of the self, and the beginning of a life that is truly, deeply, and unconditionally real. Radical acceptance is often misunderstood as a passive form of resignation. People assume that to accept a situation is to give up, to stop fighting for what is right, or to become a doormat for the whims of others. This is a fundamental error. In psychological terms, radical acceptance has nothing to do with approval or liking what is happening. It is not about saying that a bad situation is good, or that an injustice is acceptable. Rather, it is the total, unconditional acknowledgement of reality as it is, without the exhausting mental energy spent trying to wish it away. It is the final surrender of the internal debate between how things are and how you believe they should be. When you refuse to accept reality, you remain in a state of constant, low-level war with the world. You are essentially telling your nervous system that the current environment is a threat because it does not match your internal expectations. This triggers the release of stress hormones, which keeps you in a state of hyperarousal. You become reactive, defensive, and short-sighted. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for nuanced, long-term decision-making, begins to shut down, and the more primal parts of your brain take over. You are no longer solving problems. You are merely trying to discharge the tension caused by your own resistance. The path to radical acceptance begins by differentiating between pain and suffering. Pain is an unavoidable aspect of being human. If you lose a job, a loved one, or face a physical injury, you will experience the physiological and emotional sensation of pain. This is the truth of your current experience. Suffering, however, is optional. Suffering is the mental multiplication of pain. It is the story you tell yourself about why the pain shouldn't be there. It is the questioning, the bargaining, the blame, and the desperate search for a way to rewind time. When you resist the pain, you add a layer of psychological friction that turns a sharp, temporary hurt into a dull, chronic ache. Radical acceptance is the decision to experience the pain without the secondary layer of suffering. The paradox of change, as identified in Gestalt psychology, is that change happens only when you become what you are, not when you try to become what you are not. When you are in a state of denial or active resistance, you are essentially trying to build your life on a foundation of unreality. You are trying to act as if a bridge exists where there is only a river. You cannot navigate a landscape that you refuse to look at. By accepting the reality of your current circumstances, no matter how harsh, unfair, or undesirable they may be, you gain a clear-eyed view of your actual starting position. You cannot begin your journey toward a better future until you have firmly planted your feet on the ground of your present truth. Consider the metaphor of a pilot navigating a storm. If the pilot looks at the radar and sees a massive turbulence, they do not sit in the cockpit and argue with the storm. They do not get angry at the clouds, or demand that the wind change direction. To do so would be to crash the plane. Instead, the pilot accepts the reality of the storm as a complete, undeniable fact. Because they accept the existence of the storm, they can then focus all of their resources, intelligence, and training on the process of flying through it. Their acceptance of the storm allows them to act with precision. Resistance would be a distraction. Acceptance is the prerequisite for effective action. Most of our lives are spent in a state of emotional resistance. We feel sad, and we judge ourselves for being sad. We feel anxious, and we tell ourselves that we should be calm. We feel trapped, and we fantasize about being elsewhere. This constant judgment of our own internal state prevents us from processing our emotions. Emotions are like waves. They are designed to rise, crest, and recede. When you accept an emotion, when you allow yourself to fully feel the sadness or the anxiety without trying to fix it, you allow the wave to pass through you. When you resist it, you build a dam, and the pressure eventually causes a flood. Radical acceptance is the act of opening the floodgates and letting the experience pass, rather than trapping it inside your psyche. This is particularly challenging when we are dealing with our own perceived failures. The striver archetype is terrified of failure, viewing it as a terminal judgment on their worth. But if you practice radical acceptance, you see failure not as a definition of your identity, but as a piece of data. If a business project fails, the fact is, the project failed. Resistance adds, the project failed, and that means I am incompetent, and that means I will never succeed, and my life is a mess. The objective fact is manageable. The narrative of failure is what destroys your mental health. By stripping away the narrative and accepting the fact, you regain the ability to look at what went wrong, learn from it, and adjust your approach. You become agile rather than fragile. Radical acceptance also fundamentally shifts the way you interact with other people. Much of our interpersonal conflict arises because we are trying to control or change the people around us. We have an idea of how they should behave, how they should talk, and how they should treat us. When they deviate from our mental script, we become frustrated and angry. We think that if we just argue hard enough, they will eventually see things our way. But radical acceptance allows you to see people as they are with all their flaws, limitations, and unique perspectives, instead of as the characters you have cast in your personal drama. You stop being disappointed by their inability to be who you want them to be. This does not mean you accept mistreatment. It means you accept the reality of the person's character, which then allows you to make calm, rational decisions about your boundaries and your future engagement with them. In the workplace, this is the hallmark of the most effective leaders. While others are panicking when a market shift occurs or a client pulls out, the leader who practices radical acceptance is already analyzing the new environment. They are not wasting energy on why this happened or this shouldn't be happening. They are fully engaged with what is happening now. They are grounded. Their calm creates a container for everyone else's anxiety. They are able to pivot because they are not attached to the previous, outdated plan. They are dancing with reality, while others are trying to hold on to the wreckage of their expectations. To practice this, you must develop the habit of pausing. When something goes wrong, you will feel the immediate surge of resistance. Your chest might tighten, your mind might race, and you might feel a rush of negative emotion. That is the moment of choice. You can follow the path of resistance, the path of complaining, blaming, and fighting the wind, or you can choose to breathe and say, "This is what is happening right now." It is a simple, quiet, yet incredibly powerful internal statement. It is not an admission of defeat. It is an admission of truth. It is the acknowledgement that reality is the only thing that is actually real, and your resistance is just a mental echo. Once you have accepted the reality of a situation, you will notice that your energy returns to you. The energy that was being used to deny the situation is suddenly available for use. You can then ask, given this reality, what is the most effective step I can take? This shifts you from a victim of circumstances to an active participant in your own life. You are no longer asking the universe to change, you are changing your tactics to align with the way the world actually works. This is not about settling for less, it is about navigating toward more, using the actual map of the world rather than the hallucinated map of your desires. Many people fear that if they accept things as they are, they will lose their motivation to improve. They worry that they will become complacent or lazy. The opposite is true. True, sustainable motivation comes from a place of clear vision, not a place of desperate avoidance. When you are running away from a reality you refuse to accept, you are running in fear. That kind of motivation burns out. But when you move toward a goal from a place of radical acceptance, you are moving with purpose. You have acknowledged your starting point. You have acknowledged the obstacles in your path, and you have chosen your direction with full awareness. That is a form of power that cannot be shaken by the inevitable setbacks of life. Ultimately, radical acceptance is the realization that life, in its vast, indifferent complexity, is far larger than your personal comfort. It is the maturity to stop demanding that the world be a mirror for your ego. When you drop the demand, you stop being a passenger in your own life. You take the wheel. You stop being a spectator who is constantly heckling the play, and you become the actor who is performing in the theater of the present moment. You realize that you don't need the universe to care about you in order for your life to be meaningful. You are the one who gives it meaning, and you do that best when you are standing firmly in the truth of what is. This is the ultimate form of self-liberation. You are finally, after all these years, no longer fighting yourself. You are no longer fighting the world. You are finally home. The final frontier in the journey towards psychological freedom is the transition from a life of force to a life of flow. If the previous sections have dismantled the illusion of control, addressed the weight of the known, and established the necessity of radical acceptance, this final part must address the practical application, how to inhabit the world without the exhausting mechanism of trying. To live without trying is not to descend into lethargy or passivity. On the contrary, it is the highest form of human functioning. It is the transition from operating like a machine that is constantly grinding against its own gears, to operating like a river that follows the path of least resistance while carrying immense power. The first step in practical surrender is to understand the difference between goal orientation and process immersion. The striver lives in a state of suspended animation, convinced that the only meaningful part of existence is the moment of arrival. They treat their entire life as a preamble to some future event that will justify their existence. In contrast, the person who has mastered the art of surrender is entirely process-oriented. This does not mean they lack ambition. A surgeon performing a complex procedure must be focused on the outcome, but the most elite surgeons possess a quality of detached intensity. They are not thinking about the prestige, the money, or the fear of a lawsuit. They are fully submerged in the anatomy, the movement of their hands, and the immediate reality of the patient. They have surrendered the need for a specific ego-driven outcome to the requirements of the task at hand. You can apply this to your own life by conducting a daily audit of your intentions. Notice the frequency with which you are performing an action to reach a result versus performing an action because the action itself is necessary and meaningful. When you are writing an email, are you writing it to get the validation of the recipient, or are you writing it to convey information clearly? When you are working out, are you doing it to prove something to your reflection in the mirror, or are you doing it to honor the capacity and health of your body? When you strip away the ego-driven need for validation, you find that your output becomes more consistent, more creative, and significantly higher in quality. You stop wasting mental energy on the what-if scenarios and pour that energy into the what-is. This brings us to the concept of the flow state. The flow state is the psychological condition where the sense of self-consciousness dissolves. It is the state in which you become so deeply engaged with the present moment that you lose track of time, your worries, and your ego. In this state, you are not trying to perform, you are simply performing. The action is happening through you, rather than being forced by you. Achieving this state is impossible if you are holding on to the tension of the striver. You cannot enter flow if you are worried about whether you are doing it right or if you are comparing yourself to others. To reach this state, you must relinquish the need to be the conductor. You must trust your training, your experience, and your intuition, and then simply get out of your own way. Practical surrender requires a radical shift in how you handle setbacks. The striver views a setback as a disaster, a signal to try harder, or a reason to quit. The person practicing surrender views a setback as a piece of feedback. It is simply information about the environment. When a plan fails, you don't take it personally. You analyze the variables, adjust your approach, and continue moving. You treat life as a grand experiment rather than a high-stakes exam. This is the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed, ego-based identity. When your identity is tied to the success of your plans, you are fragile. When your identity is grounded in the reality of your own existence, you are anti-fragile. You become stronger for the challenge because you have used the information to refine your navigation. You must also learn to navigate the high-stakes world without being a victim of your own expectations. This requires the practice of compartmentalization without denial. You can have high aspirations, you can work to build a business, raise a family, or contribute to your community while simultaneously acknowledging that you have no ultimate control over the results. You do the work with the intensity of a person who cares deeply, but you release the attachment to the outcome with the wisdom of a person who knows the world is indifferent. This is the ultimate paradox of high performance: to care intensely about the process while being emotionally indifferent to the result. When you reach this state, you become unstoppable. You are no longer paralyzed by the fear of failure, because you have already accepted that failure is an inherent part of the landscape. To practice this in your daily life, start by observing your physiological response to your own goals. When you feel a sense of pressure or contraction in your body, ask yourself what you are holding on to. Are you holding on to the fear of what others will think? Are you holding on to the need to be seen as successful? The moment you identify the source of that tension, take a deep breath and consciously decide to relax that grip. You don't need to quit your goals. You only need to quit the trying. You need to stop using force. You will find that when you let go of that specific type of tension, your mind becomes quieter, your thoughts become sharper, and your actions become more efficient. Living without trying also means embracing the beauty of the unknown. We are so obsessed with having a 5-year plan, a roadmap, and a guarantee of safety that we become blind to the opportunities that exist in the present. If you are always looking 5 miles down the road, you will trip over the rock directly in front of you. By narrowing your focus to the immediate next step, you gain a level of presence that is rare. You see things that others miss. You notice nuances in conversations, patterns in your environment, and opportunities that were hidden behind the curtain of your own anxiety. This is not about being short-sighted. It is about being profoundly present. When you are fully in the present, you are prepared for whatever the future brings, because you are not distracted by the phantom of a future that may never arrive. Ultimately, practical surrender is a form of trust. It is the decision to trust that you are capable of navigating life without the artificial scaffolding of your ego. It is the recognition that the intelligence that runs your heart, your breath, and your nervous system is the same intelligence that allows you to make decisions, solve problems, and create value in the world. When you stop trying, you are essentially saying that you have enough faith in your own being to stop micromanaging it. You allow the natural flow of your intelligence to emerge. You will find that life becomes lighter. The heavy burden of having to be someone, to prove something, and to control everything simply falls away. This is the life of the master, the leader, and the truly free person. They are not worried about the next move because they are so intimately attuned to the present one. They are not afraid of the storm because they have learned how to sail with the wind. They do not demand that life care about them because they have found a deeper sense of worth that is entirely independent of the world's opinion. They are, in the purest sense, alive. They are not just surviving, they are participating. They are not just existing, they are unfolding. As you move forward, remember that this is not a one-time achievement. It is a practice. You will catch yourself trying again. You will feel the ego tighten its grip. You will feel the temptation to rush, to force, and to control. That is not a failure. That is simply the human condition. When you notice it, just smile, take a deep breath, and let it go. It is a moment-by-moment process of returning to the truth. You don't need to reach a state of enlightenment where you are perfect. You only need to reach a state of awareness where you can observe your own tendency to resist and then gently choose to relax back into the flow. Life does not care about your struggle. It does not care about your resistance. It is going to continue to move, evolve, and change regardless of what you do. You have the choice to fight the current and exhaust yourself, or to learn to swim with it and reach your destination with clarity, grace, and an abundance of energy. The choice is yours to make, not once, but every single day. The moment you stop trying, you start living. The moment you stop wrestling with reality, you begin to experience the depth, the beauty, and the profound intelligence of the life you are actually leading. You are here, you are enough, and you are exactly where you need to be. Everything else is just noise. Embrace the silence, embrace the flow, and finally, be free.